Freedom Flyers, the story of Jerome and John Ellis Edwards, Steubenville's Tuskegee Airmen, by Whitney Goff and Natalie Campana, as told by Deborah Keith. We would like to give a special thank you to Deborah Keith, who brought the story of her uncles Jerome and John Ellis Edwards back home to Steubenville. Thank you to the Steubenville Public Library, Janice Young of the West Virginia State University Archives, Sam Turntine of the Steubenville Board of Education Office, Monica Montenegro of Steubenville High School, and other Steubenville City School staff for supporting this special project. This book is dedicated to Jerome and John Ellis Edwards, our own Tuskegee Airmen. We celebrate you as Steubenville's native sons. May your selflessness and bravery inspire future generations to fly towards their dreams. Two boys from Steubenville. The 1920s were an interesting time for Americans. Prosperity and creativity abounded during this era in American history, but for two brothers in Steubenville, Ohio, the 1920s sparked a light which would set Jerome and John Ellis Edwards on a unique journey of American heroism and freedom. Jerome and Ellis Edwards grew up in a small river town called Steubenville, Ohio. The steel industry in this area created economic stability and attracted diverse groups of people immigrating from Western Europe and migrating from the southern United States. The Edwards family was one such family. This African-American family of six lived in a well-appointed house on the corner of 9th and Main Streets. In Steubenville, the family had a better way of life and more opportunities for education. The Edwards children were educated in the Steubenville public school system, raised along other small-town children with big, turn-of-the-century dreams. Living in such a prosperous area allowed the children to dream of life outside of the Ohio River Valley. The Edwards children flourished in Steubenville city schools despite living through the Great Depression. Jerome Edwards graduated from high school in the late 1930s and decided to further his education in order to take the first steps towards his dream. Ellis would later join him. The Ellis brothers were leaving Steubenville for the next adventure. During World War II, the steel mills were booming with production to help supply the war effort. The demand for steel products attracted more and more workers and their families to Steubenville. In response to this population growth, Steubenville City Schools built the new Steubenville High School located at 420 North 4th Street. Steubenville High School was the first $1 million school created for advancing technologies and academics. Steubenville High School is still in use today and features an aviation program for the students. Jerome enrolled at the West Virginia State College in Institute, West Virginia, near the state capital, Charleston. This college was specifically for African American students because during this time, many schools in the country were racially segregated. For this reason, only African American students could attend the college, and all classes were taught by African American professors. Despite being racially segregated, West Virginia State College was known for being the best public institution for educating African Americans interested in studying applied sciences, languages, literature and fine arts, natural sciences and mathematics, and social sciences and philosophy. Jerome loved the college so much he encouraged his brother Ellis to study there too. Both brothers studied hard, with Jerome earning a bachelor's degree in business and Ellis enrolling in the new dentistry program. They were only two of the many young African American students using this opportunity presented to them to achieve their dreams. The brothers earned top grades and were well respected by their professors, fraternity brothers, and classmates. Jerome and Ellis were working hard and well on their way to achieving their dreams when war threatened the freedom and safety of America. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor in Honolulu, Hawaii on December 7, 1941, causing the United States of America to enter World War II. This attack from the opposite side of the country called Jerome, Ellis, and many other Americans to join the military and help defend the country. This war also created a unique opportunity for African Americans. They were going to be allowed to fly in the United States Air Force. The Edwards brothers and some of their friends at West Virginia State College were recruited to participate in a civilian pilot training program authorized by the Civil Aeronautics Authority. This opportunity was extremely rare. The West Virginia State College was only one of the original 6 historically black colleges to offer an aviation program specifically for teaching African Americans to fly. The graduates of this program would later become some of the most skilled and fearsome pilots to fight for their country during World War II. Graduating class, Tuskegee Army Airfield, Alabama, Class 42J, November 11th, 1942. Jerome Edwards, Steubenville, Ohio. Terry Charlton, Beaumont, Texas. Howard Ball, Petersburg, Virginia. Melvin Jackson, Warrenton, Virginia. One of the first Tuskegee Airmen was West Point graduate Benjamin O. Davis, Jr. He was selected as the commander of the 99th Squadron and the 332nd Fighter Group during World War II, and later became the U.S. Air Force's first African American general. The success of the Tuskegee Airmen was in large part due to Davis's leadership. Jerome Ellis and other African American pilots joined the 332nd Fighter Group of the United States Air Force after completing civilian pilot training. But while the United States Air Force now allowed African Americans to join, the training was still racially segregated from the white airmen. It did not matter if the men of the 332nd wanted to defend their country or if they had flight experience. Many white officers and pilots did not believe African Americans were able to fly as well as white pilots because of the color of their skin. All of the African American airmen traveled to Tuskegee Army Airfield in Tuskegee, Alabama, where they trained to prepare for combat overseas. There, they were treated differently, including having the worst, most worn-out planes and limited resources. The men were set up for failure, but they used this adversity as inspiration to study harder, train longer, and work together to prove themselves as pilots and Americans. The loss of life from the war effort in Europe and in the Pacific created an unfortunate opportunity for African American pilots to fly during the war. These opportunities, while very dangerous and risky, gave the African American pilots the chance to demonstrate their skills to the military commanders. Their success could lead to equal treatment of African American soldiers in the military. It could also lead to African American citizens being treated equally in the United States by helping to end segregation. However, if they failed, it would prove the people who doubted them right. The 332nd Fighter Group had to be perfect to prove their skill as pilots. African American pilots were as good as white pilots, and now was their chance to prove it to the world. Tragedy strikes. While flying a special training exercise in Escoda, Michigan, the 332nd Fighter Group experienced tragedy. Jerome Edwards lost his life after he experienced engine failure during the test flight of a prototype combat plane. This tragedy deeply affected the close group of pilots, especially Ellis. The loss of his older brother qualified Ellis for a family hardship honorable discharge from the military. As the last living Edwards son, the United States government recognized his importance to his family back home. Ellis was provided the perfect excuse to go back to civilian life, finish school, and start a family. According to the United States government, the Edwards family had sacrificed enough for the country. But Ellis knew he and his brother had joined the Air Force to protect America. Jerome made the ultimate sacrifice in the name of protecting his family from enemies abroad. By volunteering to test the plane, he saved hundreds of other pilots from experiencing the same tragedy. These pilots could live to fight another day. In honor of his brother Jerome, Ellis chose to continue training with the Tuskegee Airmen and to serve his country. The Red Tails saved the day. Ellis Edwards completed his training, earning his wings and a commission to second lieutenant in 1944. Ellis and other members of the 332nd, now known as the Red Tails for having red tails painted on their airplanes, conducted combat and escort missions over Nazi territory in Europe. During these missions, the Red Tails fought German fighter planes in order to protect American bombers. The Red Tails would engage in airplane battles called dogfights with German pilots. They became known as expert pilots for their battle records and for not losing any plane they were escorting. White pilots began requesting their escort services because they earned the reputation for being the best. They had done it. They were perfect, proving again and again that African Americans are equal to white Americans. Ellis earned the Distinguished Flying Cross for his skills and heroism during World War II. The success of Ellis and the other Red Tails was instrumental to President Harry S. Truman's decision to desegregate the military in 1948. The skill and bravery of the Red Tails proved to the world African American soldiers were as skilled, brave, and patriotic as the white soldiers. While segregation did not end in the United States until the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s, Ellis and the other Red Tails moved the United States closer to equality through their flying. The work of the Ellis brothers from Steubenville and hundreds of other American military heroes like them demonstrate a uniquely African American story of heroism and freedom. Jerome and John Ellis Edwards from Steubenville, Ohio, started from humble beginnings. But through hard work and determination, both brothers went to college and joined the elite Tuskegee Airmen, the first African American aviators known as the Red Tails. Jerome and Ellis experienced adversity, but their heroism and skills made them true American heroes.